Good morning, or good afternoon, or any other part of the day to anybody who might be watching this. Today, I, Andrew Gibbons, has with me my favourite learning conversation partner. Yes, I do say that to everybody I work with, and it's Rebecca Norton. No further time on that than to say, Rebecca, tell us who you are and what you do quickly, and we'll get on with this.
Thank you. Good morning. Yeah, my name's Rebecca Norton, and my business is called Sense of Direction.
Gosh, that was quick. Well done. That was quicker than I thought you'd be. So today, Rebecca, I will start with a thank you. Thank you for bringing to my attention Nancy Kline, Time to Think, More Time to Think, the book I've got on order, which is The Promise, which is about not interrupting, all that stuff, all the Nancy Kline stuff I'm starting to know started with you, and I'm very grateful for you for that.
Thank you very much. I was very grateful to discover it myself about probably 10 years ago, I think it was. I was introduced to it and you know, it was life-changing to some respects. It was very, very impactful.
I feel better already because I'm usually more than 10 years behind the curve. So it's only 10 years that it's taken me to catch up with this. I obviously don't speak to enough informed people like yourself. Right. Sorry, people who are having to deal with this banter. Let's get into the content because there's some very good stuff here. What we're going to do here today, he says, I'm pressing a button and hoping that it works, is we're going to hit this issue. What is a thinking environment and why is it important? Because after all, just because something is what it is, it's got to have a reason to know about it, think about it, and we are going to suggest at least consider the implications of application. So this is about using the lessons of the Time to Think books in the workplace.
Yeah, definitely. So in answer to the question, what is a thinking environment? It's an environment in which people are given the space and the time to think, I guess, really. But it's the certain elements, and we're going to look into that later on, aren't we? The different elements that make up a thinking environment. But it's something that I think we don't get a lot of these days. You know, how much time are we given to think without being interrupted? And then that's the main premise of it, isn't it, really, is not being interrupted when we're doing our thinking, when we're doing our talking. So I feel it's really, really important and can make such a big difference on personal lives, business, everything.
No question. And I was really working hard not to interrupt you while you were talking about the need not to interrupt, because it is a conscious process. This does not come naturally to most people, not even people who have an innate ability to show interest, empathize, show emotional intelligence, all that stuff. Even there, it takes an effort. And for people like me, for whom that's light years away, we have to really think about it because we're just over enthusiastic. I don't think I'm rude and impolite. I just want to get in with my point of view very often because I agree with somebody so much. So it's a discipline, isn't it, more than a skill?
Definitely, it takes a lot of practice. Like you say, we want to get our point across. We're enthusiastic. We want to show that we understand, or that, you know, that we've got that similar experience. And unfortunately, in that enthusiasm, we then thinking, and it's so difficult. And the other thing that's interesting about the thinking environment is actually through attentive listening, we're also don't show it so much on our face either, and that's really difficult. So not only are we listening, we're trying not to show too much emotion because we don't want to distract the other person, and it's really, really hard, and it takes a lot of practice to do, but it is worth it in the end.
It's hard, it's important, it's difficult, and these are all things we'll talk about. But let's get on to the things we said we'd be talking about. So this is the book that's best known to people, I think. It's not the only one. I checked my research this morning. Date of original publication, 1999. So in 2021, this is not new stuff. This has been around a long time. I don't know how, but it's got a bit of a re-emergence thing going on, I think, at the moment. Or maybe that's just me having caught on to it. But it's been around 2 centuries now. It's in its 2nd century of publication. And of course, More Time to Think followed on afterwards.
Yeah, and it is, I think, but it's still relevant. And I think perhaps it's maybe getting that resurgence because people are recognizing how useful it is and how important it is and how much we don't get this sort of environment where people are given the space to think. There's a lot of information out there, a lot of distractions that we're getting messages pinging at us, we're getting people trying to be rushing off for one thing or another thing or whatever, and we just don't get that space. And actually, it makes such a difference. And I know one of the quotes you've got is around that quality thinking time, and that's what this gives you.
Oh, crikey, I'm so pleased myself. I didn't interrupt you. I think there's a lot in what you've said there. We've got to stop agreeing with each other all the time, but it's good. 20 years ago, we weren't talking about well-being. We weren't talking about mental health in the workplace. Those sorts of things are probably what's fueling the new interest, I suspect.
It could well be, yeah, definitely. And given there is that sense of well-being, I think, when you feel listened to, when you feel supported and are given the space to share your ideas, you know, I think that definitely increases your well-being. If you're not being listened to at work, you go into a meeting and you think, you know, what's the point in being there? Because any idea I say is going to get shot down, or I don't even get this, you know, the chance to speak, never mind the ideas. And then when I do speak, I have to feel like I'm rushing because somebody else wants to speak and everything. That is not good for your well-being, is it? You know, you don't feel valued. You don't feel like a useful part of the team when that happens. So this is really, really important.
And that's what I like about this. When you first, crikey, it sounds like you're my total source of knowledge here. When you led me towards well-being beyond the word, but into the substance of it, I was one of those many people, I think, that thought, yeah, well-being, great concept, but what's it actually mean? Well, well-being is this sort of stuff. Like you say, it's about being respected. It's about being valued. And people who aren't don't feel well in the workplace. So here we go, into the stuff. I've started this meatily, if you like, in content-wise with this quote, because it's the first thing she says in the book being Time to Think. And yeah, I'm going to read it out. Everything we do depends for its quality on the thinking we do first. That's a very bold statement. It's a very categorical statement. I'll tell you what, it's a very true statement.
It is. I mean, if we rush into something and we don't think things through, then later on down the line, something's going to go wrong, or it doesn't work out how we expect it to, or we have more problems and things. So when we're given the space to actually think about things properly, then we can air some of these concerns. We can overcome some of those limiting beliefs that we might have. We can identify some of these barriers and obstacles, and we can work them through before we even get started. You know, how many ideas don't get off the ground because we're not given the time to air them and to be listened to and share them properly, you know? So this is really, really important.
I think it is. I've rarely encountered so few words that mean so much. I'm going to say them again. Everything we do depends for its quality on the thinking we do first. Now, for me, Rebecca, that is very contextual as well. This can be transactional, as we are now, in conversation. Am I thinking about what I'm going to say next? Am I thinking about what you've just said? Or am I just responding with what I would have said anyway and prepared in my head? Or am I adjusting, parking, jettisoning what I might have said because I have listened to what you've said and am building on what you've said previous? So transactional, in conversation it was, but also during collectives, meetings and group meetings, that sort of stuff. So often people speak immediately, and I'm talking about the millisecond after someone's finished, if they let them get that far. They haven't thought about what they're about to say. They haven't considered what that person said. And by doing that, they've shown that.
Yeah, it's so true, isn't it? Is we don't... It's very obvious when you haven't listened to somebody properly, you know, because either you jumped in straight away, like you said, you're not actually processing that. It might not even be relevant what you said. You like you said, you've got that agenda. You must get your point across, and you're just waiting for a gap in that conversation so you can jump in, you know. And it's interesting, and I love one of the things about the thinking environment is actually just because somebody isn't talking doesn't mean that there's nothing going on. Yep. It's, you know, it's purposeful silence. It's, you can't just jump in, and because you break, that's the thing, isn't it? You distract them from their thoughts. If you jump in, you take them off on a whole different train of thought, and they've lost what it was that they were thinking on. And I think that's key. And this is where it can be uncomfortable for people, because a lot of people are not comfortable with silence. And I think that's one of the harder things, is we're not comfortable with silence.
Yes, and I'm trying so hard to model this stuff by not now taking in a tangent, but by building on what you've said, because this is really profound. There aren't that many things in my 40 nearly years in the learning business that I think are profound, that have a serious impact. The stuff I'd look at and think, hey, that's interesting. And the stuff that I encounter and think, whoa, yeah, I like that. This has reached me. This has dug deep into me and said, this explains a lot of the reasons why things go well and don't go well behaviorally, both individually, transactionally, and in groups, large or small. This is really important. And it is about respect. It's about showing respect to someone who's spoken, or might just be thinking, like, what are you thinking? You might ask. Because what people have on their mind and what they say should be shown to be important.
Yeah, it is, isn't it? You know, that's what, like you say, it's showing that respect and that other person matters.
Yeah.
You know, and just being listened to. Sometimes a lot of people find that talking to somebody or just talking through their concerns helps them to feel better. So I think this is maybe why you touched on well-being before. I think this is maybe why it is maybe getting that resurgence, is because of that impact on well-being. Just talking things through, getting things out of your head, off your chest, often makes us feel better. So just having that space and knowing that somebody is going to be there attentively listening to you allows them to offload. You know, nothing else might come of it, but they will feel better because they've got everything out of their head that's bothering them, and it makes them feel better.
Well, yeah, I keep saying the same things in different words. And we'll move on to something in a moment. You know, this to me encapsulates the whole book, and that's why very deliberately, and no doubt with editorial support, she started with these words, because that is a strong basis to work from. I like what we're saying about respect, but this isn't purely about giving people therapy sessions. This, for me, is about business effectiveness, and that's where I want to focus on during this conversation, because it's not all there, just tell me how it's going type stuff. This is about drawing more out from people who create better decisions, drawing more out from people and allowing people the time and space to fully explore issues that make businesses more effective. And for me, it's one of the reasons why so many are not. But let's go on. So another one of my favorite philosophers, more than writers or leadership chaps, is Chandy, as I used to refer to him. God, he must be an age now. He's still alive, I have to check. This is from The Empty Raincoat, 1980s, this will be. And she quotes Charles Handy, which again shows an interesting confluence. She likes who I like. Hey, it can't be bad. And he says, here are the words, how do I know what I think until I hear myself speak? I had to read that a couple of times before it made sense to me, mostly because I'm stupid, but also to get the true value from it. How do I know what I think until I hear myself speak? He uses words very deliberately. He has used those words very carefully in order to say, not just a thought. That was a thought. It lasted a millionth of a second. Now I'm looking out the window at the bin men or what's going on. No, until I hear myself speak, until I slow down that thought, articulate it, and hear myself say words that are so much stronger than a fleeting image across my head.
Yeah, and that's interesting, isn't it? Because, like you say, a thought can just last it's a fleeting thought and then it's lost again. But when we say it, it becomes real. And I think this is where coaches can come in really helpful as well, because I don't know whether this has happened to you. You say something and then a coach will reflect back to you what you've just said, and you think, oh, is that really what I said? And then it allows you, I think, just sometimes having that allows you to just check with yourself, is that what I meant? You know, it is a really powerful statement, that I think. So when you hear it, it activates a number of different senses, I think, doesn't it? So we hear it, so we get that feedback. Literally hearing it again in our own voice is different to hearing it to the voice in our head. Yeah,
I think that's true, and we're going to go further within this one than we'd planned, but I can always chop it in half because this is all such good stuff. I know you've got a time scale to keep to, but we'll do that. Wave at me frantically if you're coming within 2 minutes of when you need to go, because we'll work through some really strong stuff here. I was told something ages ago, I learned something from someone a long time ago, that when you write something, you should read it out in speech. Is the best way to proof your own work that you've written, because otherwise you haven't slowed it down. You're just reading. Yeah, I read that. No, you didn't. You just scanned it. But when you read it out loud, oh, did I say that? That's wrong. That punctuation's wrong. Oh, look at that typo. Because we've slowed ourselves down to read what we've written. The same is true of thoughts. I'm not saying we should go around saying everything that we think, because we'd be a bit daft, and maybe probably it would be suggested we need some help, and it would take a long time as well. So we are talking about being selective here. But let's not kid ourselves that everything we think has been retained and understood by ourselves.
Yeah, and I think speaking something allows you to process it differently, because like you say, when our thoughts are much faster than our tongue will work and our speech will work. So when we speak something, it means we've got to slow it down, and that gives us time to process stuff.
Yes.
And I think this is where it's helpful in a workplace environment, because I know, this is what we're going to focus on, isn't it? In terms of a workplace, it helps people to process maybe problems or things as well. And this is why it is so important, is because you will get different people's perspectives. So rather than just your own, if you genuinely get your team's thoughts on things and their ideas, just think how powerful that could be.
Oh, please. You're describing a workplace I've never seen in 40 years. I know a lot of people think they run meetings which are participative, but they don't. I watch them. And when I say afterwards, how many people spoke at that meeting? Well, blah, 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 blah. Really? And how many people spoke for more than 15 words at a time, other than you, in those 3 hours? This is important. And I think in a business sense, it's about saying, okay, now what do you all think? Okay, I know what I think about this. I don't know what you think. Tell me. We've got to use these words, and then we've got to listen to people when they've been invited to speak, which is the other hard thing to do. So it's hard to say, I know what I think, what do you think? And then it's harder still to put up with sometimes, because they might think differently yourself, what it is they're saying. And to genuinely, well, in Nancy Kline's words, when you are listening to people, when you are attentive, she says, listening with respect, interest, and you ready for this word, fascination. When have you experienced someone in the workplace who's fascinated by what someone else says?
And a lot of the time it's because we're rushing, isn't it? We've always got an agenda, or we've got to rush on to the next meeting, or actually, I don't care what you think. All right, I'm going to pretend that I care what you think, but actually I don't, and I'm not going to really listen. I'm going to go with my way, but it looks better if I ask for your opinion first. But this is surely why we employ different people in a team, because we want to have that collaborative effect, not just because we want, somebody to do the job. So if you tap into everybody's strengths, just think how much more productive, how much more powerful a team could be.
Well, okay, let's hit a few, because my second to last slide does exactly that. This looks like a lot. It's not a lot. We don't have to even look at these one at a time. But I think it's important to say that Nancy Kline's Time to Think book introduces the concept, and concepts are theoretical, they're frameworks. This is practical, this works, this can be put into place. These are the 10 components of a thinking environment. We don't have time here today. Maybe we can do it another time to actually pull these apart. We've been talking about some of these, haven't we? Is there any that we haven't touched on that you feel now is the appropriate time to emphasize?
I think one that sticks out to me for some reason, and I'm not sure why particularly, but feels relevant, is the appreciation. If so, something that we would do, again, I've practiced this when I was doing my teacher training, is that at the end of the conversation you would give appreciation to the other person who'd been listening, and it works so each person would give their appreciation, and it might be along the lines of, thank you for listening to me today, or thank you for whatever it is, or I appreciated it when. And I think if we all did that more in team meetings, then people would, it comes down to that respect thing again, and it also makes people feel more confident in sharing their ideas next time. I think appreciation is one of the things that's underused in a workplace environment in a genuine way, and I think that actually, even if you just implemented that one thing to start off with, I think that could make a big difference in itself.
Yeah. I like appreciation. I like praise, so long as it's not disingenuous, because I think sometimes this can be done for the right reasons, but insincerely. So it's got to be genuine. And I think this is what concerns me, Rebecca. I think people in authority in organizations are too far down the track of not doing this to be taken seriously if they give it a go.
Yeah, I think this is the difficulty. Is I think it would be very difficult for a team to start implementing all of these if they've never done it before, because it will feel alien. People, there won't be buy-in. People will feel that there's an underlying agenda behind this. It has to be
on a course.
Yeah, it has to be introduced in a very sensitive way, and possibly just one or two elements at a time.
Mm-hmm. Because this is a lot, isn't it? I mean, this is a long list of 10, and I've worked hard. I'm so good at this, of conflating her explanations to just those 4 or 5 words on each. There's chapters on these in the book. They're short chapters. There's a chapter called In Praise of Praise. And for instance, they're three-page chapters. It sort of recognizes that people have got a short attention span, unfortunately, for this stuff. But yes, I mean, I could play that game too and say, I like this one. I like them all. They're all so important, and they can be They can be got back to by anybody who's following this. So let's talk about some, and I use that word very deliberately, some, not all, of the payoffs, because after all, we're talking about something here that isn't just a lovely thing to do to make people happy and to help their mental health and well-being, and hallelujah, the world's a better place. That isn't easy. That isn't likely. We've got to focus on the business payoffs. So I'm not going to read this list out, but I just put together, I'm counting them 6. I could have come up with 26, but just 6. Have you got any thoughts on these? Any others? Do you take issue with this? Here we're talking about the business applications of a thinking environment.
Well, I think this list just shows you how effective this could be and what a difference it could make. It's not just a people-centered thing. This, like you said, this is a genuine business thing.
Yeah.
It can reduce staff turnover. If you're engaging your staff and they feel valued and appreciated and listened to, you're going to get less staff turnover. You are going to get people who are happier at work, which then means that they will do a better job, which means you have happier customers. The impact is massive. I agree completely with all of them, and like you, I agree there are certainly going to be more payoffs. So it's not only a case of being a useful thing that makes for happy staff, it actually makes business sense doing this as well.
Yeah, I'm happy to play the numbers game. I'm happy that I believe in the few instances where this is actually possible to be implemented. And I don't think a whole organization can do this, not of any size anyway. I don't think a BT or a Siemens or I don't know, big or Virgin or whatever it is. I'm trying to think of big organizations. I think it's too much to ask of everybody or all management and leadership in any large organization. But I think this can be done at unit level. And I'm thinking that more and more about most things in a, broadly speaking, OD way. Forget all whole organizations. I've been trying to change them for years. It's not possible. You change it for a time when someone's there, and then someone goes and it all falls to pieces. So work at unit level. And I think at a unit, not even a department in most big organizations level, this can work. If you've got, as you say, a real champion who believes in it and a real team of people that say, hey, all right, we'll give this a go. We're not just going to do it because he tells us to, but we 6, 8, 12 people think this can work. And I think that's the level that this can work at.
Definitely. I am going to challenge you on that, though. I do believe organisations can do this. I'm not saying it's going to be easy. And you're right, I think it has to start with a team at a time.
Okay.
If a team does it and it gets really good results, then other teams will look and think, actually, maybe what are they doing? Can we implement this? You're right. I don't think it can be done as a whole organisation to start with, but I do feel that it could seep through an organisation if it was taken on board by a team and it worked well and it was implemented properly. Definitely, yeah.
Okay, well, I'm not going to fight you on that, because I believe, like you, that it ought to be possible in the right circumstances and conditions. I've just frankly given up trying to do whole organisation stuff because my head's bruised still from the brick walls I bashed against. So I tend to focus on teams and unit level these days, and individuals. Anyway, so you keep fighting that good fight. Good luck with it, and I'm really behind you on it. I've just lost the will to change big organizations for the better. Anyway, so irrespective of whatever part of an organization, level of an organization, this is generic. These are all good practices. If you involve more people in more things and respect their point of view, you're more likely to get ideas from them. Those ideas are more likely to create better decisions. Those people that are being shown respect are more likely to stay longer than you would otherwise done. Where they're going to go? The opposition. They don't just evaporate. So there is no argument against this. what is the argument against giving people time to think?
On a logical sense, there isn't. I think it is more a case of potentially some of the barriers might be egos getting in the way. People think that actually, you know what, this is going to be hard to implement. This is going to be taking too much work.
Yep.
Anything new is always going to take some work. There are always going to be teething problems with things, but that's not to say it's not worth it in the long run.
Yeah, absolutely. I guess what I'm thinking is I'm picturing people's faces. I've seen so many of them over the years, and I'm working with a few of them now. I'm picturing a couple of people's faces I'm working with now that would never watch or listen to a thing like this in a month or something. They're too busy. They're too busy telling people what they think about stuff and not giving them time to think themselves. That's what they're busy doing.
Yeah. And I think the other thing, a lot of people will possibly see this as airy-fairy.
Definitely.
That's the other thing. And actually, it really isn't. But this is why it has to be introduced in a very sensitive way, but with buy-in from everybody as well to explain. And it has to be done in a genuine way. And I think this is where the potential difficulty comes, is if a manager comes in and says, right, we're doing this and this is why we're doing it and whatever, there might be some, especially if there's already some tension within a team or some sort of people feel there is a little bit of an underlying current there, then I can see that it would be very difficult to change it around. It would have to be done in a very gentle, sort of subtle way. And I think it would take time to implement, but over time, the difference would be, massive.
And we don't need to get into the pros and cons of external facilitation and appear to give ourselves a plug. That isn't what this is about. But there is sometimes a case for some external assistance in this. And my concern very often is that external support can be too intrusive and can make it hard to disengage when the organization has to do things for themselves. Anyway, that's another discussion. Another thing for another day. Crikey, there's so much in this. So I think before I go on to the last slide, I just want to keep emphasizing this is about hard-edged, measurable business effectiveness. It ain't airy-fairy. It's as far away from airy-fairy as you can get, because it's about doing practical things that make a huge difference to the bottom line. So my last slide is a challenge, and it's a sad one, really, and I hope you take exception with it because it sounds like you're going to. I've said here, is this asking too much of individuals and organizations that have settled for acceptable underperformance? And I'm deliberate about this. I keep using this term, acceptable underperformance, which is, we can be so much better, but hey, no one's on my back, no one's making me do this, I'm going to get my bonus, I'm going to be safe in my job. Why expose myself to the risk of doing something different and maybe better, but no one's asking me to. So I think individuals and organizations have settled so often and for so long for acceptable underperformance. It's become the true culture, the way things are done around here. And to discretionarily take on the risk of doing something that could make such a huge difference, but maybe not feel natural, won't get support, why do it?
And I think you've touched on the thing there. It's the culture, isn't it? The work culture is, if there is a risk averse work culture, people are not going to be willing to try something new, despite it might be good what they're doing now, but could it be better?
Absolutely.
And if you took that risk of doing something different, it might work, it might not work, but ultimately the payoff could be immense. And I think you're right. I think that's where the problem lies with it. You've got to have that culture that allows for failure as failure. I'm not. We've had a discussion around failure before, and I'm not a big believer in failure.
There's some great stuff on failure around failing forward and that sort of stuff, all that good stuff. Einstein failed a lot more often than he succeeded. Edison talks about failing tens of thousands of times before breakthroughs. Sometimes we throw glib words like resilience and persistence around like we know what they mean. To me, that means sticking at something until you know it works, or you know it doesn't, but for long enough to make a judgment. And the genuine enthusiasm I feel for this whole thing, so I struggle to know what to call it. It's not a theory, it's not a model, this whole discipline. The genuine concern I have is that key people in organizations that set the tone and the culture just won't be able to do it and persist with the effort it takes to embed it in new practice.
Yeah, I agree. I do unfortunately believe that could be the main challenge. You can't just try it once or twice and say, oh, well, it doesn't work, so we're not going to keep going with it. It's trying it, it's tweaking it, it's getting people on board. And like you say, maybe it is starting with individuals. Maybe it's starting with a team manager or, you know, somebody in a team. And that will then increase. So I think it has to be started at a really small scale and worked up from that. I don't think somebody come in and say, right, this is it, we're going to do this in all our team meetings now. This is the way it's going to be. That is not going to work.
I'm with you on that, because sometimes you get these wonderful moment, or they're not wonderful moments, they're expensive moments, where you know the managing director, chief executive, whatever, has been nobbled by somebody that they've seen prancing a stage at a conference. And they come in with this naive notion of changing the whole organization. Hey, we're all going to become a time to think organization, because this guy I met that's charged me $5,000 a day is going to change the organization and transform it. And you think, oh no, we've seen this before 18 times earlier, it never works. So I think you're right. Individually, unit-wise, you trickle it upwards and you trickle it up as far as it'll get. But you do it, you give it a go, because this isn't me saying, forget it, folks, it won't work. This is about me saying, look, to make this work requires an effort most organizations are not prepared to make. And I tell you what, that's good business. Because if you're able to do the things that others have failed to and have given up upon, you've got an edge.
Definitely, yeah. And there's a Jim Rohn quote in there somewhere, and I can't think of it off the top of my head. But if you're willing to do what others won't, then you will get results that others don't.
I think we should stop at that point, because we're getting too anecdotal and quotey. But it's good stuff, this, and we'll come back to it, Rebecca. And once again, thank you for bringing it to my attention.
Thank you very much.